family, probably a person's most important and intense relationship, and at the same time, a relationship of many facets and great complexity. Psychologist Gregory Bateson referred to the family as an infinite dance of shifting coalitions. Every person affects and is affected by other family members. The combinations of cause and effect, action and reaction are endless. The result is an ever-shifting human kaleidoscope of alliances, divisions, and redivisions. In some families, the patterns are relatively constant. In others, they are very fluid, changing frequently and spontaneously. Family researchers theorize that, to some degree, these patterns can be classified into family types. Dr. Barbara Artinian, Professor, Department of Nursing, Azusa Pacific University in California, discusses these theories.
Cantor and Lair studied a group of families, and as they analyzed what was happening in the families, they identified three types of families. The closed family is one that is very difficult to get into. Their boundaries are very tight. A typical closed family would be very tightly scheduled, have very strict routines that were regular. Space is well organized, so everybody knows exactly what is happening and who belongs where.
One example of a closed family was observed by a health professional who was working with the family because the mother had multiple sclerosis.
The clues that we got that this was a closed family was that everyone in the family had a regular place to be. She had her own place for the wheelchair. The family had very set, organized routines about this person sits here, this one is here, your towel is here, mine is there. They had a very concrete and fixed way of viewing the world. An open family is one that is not rigid in structuring time or space and is very flexible in how they manage tasks. They do not require that every family member be doing every task together, although they may all work together. But they can change their goals to meet the needs of the different family members. They're much more adaptable. In contrast, you'll have a random family where people don't try to coordinate their efforts. It's okay for every person to be doing their own thing. Every family member is free to explore and do whatever they want to do. And in fact, the family members encourage that because they don't want to tie down any one family person. Cantor and Lair want to make it very, very clear that in identifying these three types of families, they are not putting value judgments on family organization. It's three types of systems, each of which can be very healthful and functioning families. And in fact, a closed family that is very well organized can be the envy of many families. Cantor and Lair have identified the core purposes of each of the families. The family that's a closed family values stability. They don't want change in the family, and they do this through the traditions and the rituals and routines that they have. The family that's open values adaptation, and they do this through their flexible way of reaching consensus. They want the family members to agree and finally end up doing something where they're all working together because they value the opinion of each person. The core purpose of the random family is to explore. They don't want to tie any person down to any set of values or beliefs. They expect even small children to be finding themselves and identifying who they are.
Insight into family structure is needed for any professional working with a particular family. For example, a tightly organized family will probably have little difficulty following a healthcare routine. If the routine can be incorporated into the family's organization. A loosely organized family, where structure and schedules are considered less important, may have more difficulty following a rigid health regimen. Of particular importance within the total family structure are dyadic relationships, two-person alliances which seem to form naturally between members of the same generation. When a family includes both parents, this marital dyad is highly significant to all the family members. However, dyads between siblings are also important, as well as dyads between members of different generations. Dr. Marilyn Friedman, Professor, Department of Nursing at California State University, Los Angeles, discusses various types of dyads.
Bateson in the late 50s talked about three types of relationships, and one type of the complementary relationships is where one role partner complements the other. So if you have a subservient one, then you've got a leader or a dominant one. And this, I suppose, was the old patriarchal family system. The father was the patriarch or dominant one, and wife and children were in the submissive roles. The second type is a symmetrical relationship, and this is more of an egalitarian or equalitarian type of relationship where both role partners would have approximately the same amount of power. Either they could have the same amount of power and have it in different spheres of influence or in different areas, or they could share power by making mutual decisions about the same areas. And often in young families or newly formed families of newly married couples, they'll have this kind of relationship in the beginning, at least in our younger families today. And the other type is called parallel relationships. And this is where sometimes it's complementary and sometimes it's symmetrical. And this actually is the more mature type because in some cases one person has more expertise than the other one, and so in some cases then it's good for one to have the dominant role and the other have the more following role. And so this allows actually more flexibility to in some cases be more symmetrical and in some cases be flexible about the dominant and the follower role.
The complementary and symmetrical relationships sometimes have inherent problems. If a person in a complementary relationship is overly dominant, he may disregard the feelings, needs, and opinions of other family members. Children from such a family situation may grow up to be dominant themselves because they have never learned that relationships can be a matter of give and take, of negotiation and compromise. In families with marked authoritarianism, the personalities of both the dominant person and the submissive person can become severely constricted.
Then with the symmetrical relationship, the danger there is too much competitiveness. If it becomes such an issue that it has to be absolutely equal in all situations, it encourages power struggles. Again, this is if it becomes too extreme. If it's a moderate amount of egalitarianism, which is really the trend and I think which is quite healthy, then it doesn't become this kind of competitive fight for power.
Family members play individual roles as well as roles within dyads. Some of these roles are formal, social positions within the family which are prescribed by society. Each of these formal roles encompasses other roles. For example, the parental role includes providing financially for the family and socializing and caring for the children. Within the marital role, partners are expected to provide emotional and sexual intimacy for one another. Children, too, play formal roles within a family. They are expected to get an education and to conform to adult authority. Whatever the makeup of the family, their formal roles as parent, spouse, child, and sibling include providing kinship, recreation, and emotional support for one another.
Informal roles are also very important and interesting to assess in working with families. And these are the roles that society hasn't in some way encouraged and sanctioned. They're the roles that family members partake or participate in to keep equilibrium in the family. Just to give you some examples of the types of roles that family members find themselves playing, and often this is perhaps from their early years in the family, are being a martyr in the family, and that's mother's often been labeled as being a martyr to keep some kind of peace or equilibrium in the family. The great stone face is another one, somebody that just acts like he's a computer, that he knows what's right, is very impassive and shows very little emotion. Another interesting informal role that family members play, and this is typically the mother, is the go-between. And this is the person that takes communications, directives, things that one person says, and then communicates it to somebody else in the family. And in traditional families, the father would spend long hours working, and before he would leave in the morning, he'd typically give the wife 3 or 4 things that he wanted her to do. And often it was, tell Johnny that he's to take out the garbage, and tell Susie Q that I want that trash cleaned up tomorrow. And so the mother had a very powerful role because all the communications were going through her. It gave her a lot of indirect type of power, but that kind of go-between role is a very important one to recognize in families. And to realize that often the real power source is the husband who's giving the kind of directives to the wife.
Virginia Satir has described 2 other significant informal roles. One of these is the placater. This person constantly tries to please other members of the family. She never disagrees openly and is the yes woman of the family. Another informal role is the distractor, or the irrelevant one. When sensitive issues arise, when important decisions must be made, this person engages in some sort of behavior which shifts the focus of attention and thus temporarily alleviates conflict. A highly significant informal role is that of the enabler. This person, again, often the mother, supports and encourages other family members, as well as their behavior. A role similar to that of the family distractor is that of the scapegoat, the person who has been identified as the problem member of the family. To a certain extent, these informal roles are adaptive. Those playing them are consciously or unconsciously attempting to prevent tension and conflict, to maintain family homeostasis. Often, though, relying on informal roles can be destructive, not only to the person who plays the role, but also to the entire family, because family members are not communicating honestly, and they are avoiding genuine problems. Several dysfunctional patterns can be seen in informal family roles, as well as in other aspects of family interaction.
The enabler could be enabling a person to carry out some very dysfunctional behavior. And a typical situation here is in the alcoholic family. The wife often enables the husband to carry on his drinking. And one of the ways she does this is by hiding the evidence, by not telling the children, by giving excuses to his fellow workers and to his boss, so that he really isn't helped in the long run. He and his drinking pattern are only further solidified. In cases where you have the family scapegoat being used to kind of diffuse the hostility and conflict between the parents, if you work with that child and you make that child's behavior better, often what happens then is that hostility and the anxiety is displaced on another child in the family. Or if that child gets better, that the parents in some way reinforce the sick behaviors or the problematic behaviors so that the child starts going back to his old form because he in some way plays that vital function in the family. You'd hope, though, that someone would recognize that this is a system problem and would start working with the parents not only on how they are rearing that child and how they're interacting with that child that's problematic, but also work with the parents on their own problems in relating to each other and their own feelings and relationship.
Using the child to diffuse family problems is also seen in another dysfunctional pattern called triangulation. Here, a parent forms a cross-generational dyad with one of her children, attempting to find the intimacy and support that would ordinarily be found in a marital relationship. By doing this, she is diffusing the conflict with her spouse, but she is also avoiding the marital problem and putting an unfair burden on the child. Families also develop myths about themselves. For example, a troubled family may actually believe themselves to be a happy family, one in which all the members support one another. Such myths are usually perpetuated by all family members as a means of denying their limitations, the problems which are too painful for them to face. In fact, most dysfunctional patterns involve some degree of denial of serious underlying problems within the family. Families then use a variety of approaches and a variety of patterns in their ongoing relationships and functioning. The one right approach to being a healthy and nurturing family unit does not exist. The unique personalities, needs, and interactions of family members dictate the patterns that will be most effective. These patterns evolve over time, changing according to developmental stages and life experiences. When a family becomes dysfunctional, it is because maladaptive patterns have evolved. They have become locked into the family dance in an ironic attempt to preserve the family unit. To help a dysfunctional family requires sensitive and comprehensive assessment of the infinite dance of shifting coalitions.